Hello, everyone. My name is JV Robles, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at NetCom Learning. As a market leader in providing managed learning services, we are very happy to host today's executive webinar on how to lead from the middle, step by step, and why power is not positional. Presenting today's topic is Vincent Suppa. Vincent teaches graduate business courses at New York University, is an efficiency hacker, and a certified executive Six Sigma Black Belt. He specializes in working with pre-IPO startups, helping them to position themselves for a public offering, acquisition, or merger. Vincent worked in Asia as an expat as well as in the U.S. high-tech industry and European telecommunications sector. Self-described as a part of Generation Flux, he is the founding president of HR Avant-Garde. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Vincent to present today's topic.
Thank you, JV. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for joining me. The least you need to know about leading from the middle in 18 minutes. Let's get started. Our agenda today is about how power is not positional, and when it is, meaning when power comes exclusively from someone's title, it is weaker than when it emanates from personal mandate. Now, people leading companies today practice their leadership skills from the middle long before they arrived at the top. We will also cover subtopics including the role of social capital in your ascent to formal leadership, how to free up your time for leadership activities, and when is the best time to leverage your proactive move into leadership. Now, a transition to leadership follows a normal pattern. First, there's service. That covers most entry-level jobs, transactional, and even tactical jobs. And then we have governance. Governance might be managerial, or perhaps you're a director, and now your job is to govern the subordinates who are engaged in service activities to the company. And then after governance comes leadership. Leadership usually includes the entire C-suite, the executive staff, and they spend at least half their time on external relations, not just internal relations. Let's continue. Now, I'd like you to imagine the balance in your social capital analogous to the balance in your checking account. When you have social capital, you withdraw it to gain favor, and you also use it to mitigate business failures. For example, if there's a wonderful job opportunity, perhaps a 6-month rotation job in Germany, well, you could use your social capital to perhaps land that job. And also, when you make mistakes, as we all do, the more social capital you have, the more quickly those mistakes are going to be forgiven. So again, social capital is analogous to the balance in your checking account, and you withdraw it to gain favor and to mitigate business failures. Now, again, we talked about social capital as something that you need to increase, okay? So let's talk about some very specific ways that you could do that. What is the one type of compensation that we can all access and distribute? And that would be praise. We may not think of praise as a form of compensation, but we all know that if you double someone's pay, you are not going to double their productivity. That praise, the ability to make people feel good about the things that they're doing, that form of affirmation is also a form of compensation, and it's something that we all have access to and we can all distribute. So how might we go through very specific steps on at least one method to build up your social capital? Well, step one, schedule time every week at least to proactively stop by people's desks to talk. We are not talking about mere socializing. So you might schedule an hour a week to walk around and speak to perhaps 4, 5, 6, 7 people. And then I want you to identify through those conversations what we call random acts of brilliance, because you're going to speak to people, you're going to find out what they're doing for the company, and there might be 1 or 2 people that they tell you something that you find very exciting, that you find really adds value to the company, or they come up with a wonderful solution to a problem. Now, step 3, contact that person's boss, and then do their bragging. So what does this accomplish? Well, the desired result is that you now created a business excuse to build a new relationship with that person's boss, and you did not make it about you. Secondly, you have now begun the process of ingratiating yourself with that person whom you bragged about. Now, this bragging, it has to be based on a sincere, honest compliment because we need to be authentic. But as you ingratiate yourself with that person because you basically called attention to that person's boss, how well they were doing, you now begin building your social capital. And again, you also created a relationship with that person's boss. So as you do this over and over again, the next step is that you may find out that you have two people who are not communicating with each other who are working on a similar problem. And you feel strongly that if they were to synergize, they could come up with an even better solution in a much shorter time frame. So by taking steps 1 and 2, you are now able to bring people together because you have become a very valuable yet informal channel of communication. So as you bring people together whose synergy will only increase both their value, you now begin to increase your social capital even more. Now again, social capital is goodwill. It is how people perceive you. The better people perceive you, the higher your social capital. So why don't more people lead from the middle? Well, essentially, it's fear. Because people feel that there's going to be a risk advocating change. And we understand that. So what might you do? Well, if you think that the risks of advocating change and assuming an informal leadership role not based on your title, if you feel that's too risky, well, focus on leading by building your social capital first before you challenge the status quo. Now, studies show that employees who take intelligent risks tend to keep their jobs with more promotions. So on leading from the middle, again, meaning you're not put in a leadership title, but you have begun to exhibit the traits where you would lead by personal mandate, no one is going to tell you to do it. In fact, plenty of people will tell you not to do it. Now think about it. Why would your peers push you to do something that would only give you a competitive advantage over them? Now, leading from the middle is about your influence. It is not about your control. Leading from the middle is based on the premise that leadership is not positional, not based on title, but on personal mandate. It also contradicts the leadership from the top corporate cultural paradigm. And again, this is about expanding your circle of influence, not expanding your circle of control. So what is the reality about moving into a leadership position? Again, I want to reiterate, no one is going to tell you what to do it. You must make a conscious decision to lead. Now, about a fourth of you listening today will actually follow through on this decision. Most people agree it's a wonderful idea, but when we just think about something, it's a dream. But when you actually plan it and make an active decision, if you could do just one thing tomorrow that you learned from this webinar, well, you will start building momentum, and hopefully you will continue to follow through. Now, what is the cost of doing nothing? If most people will not necessarily change the quality of their professional life based on this webinar, what is the cost to them? Well, we feel that failing to lead can also be dangerous because companies are constantly decreasing their SG&A costs through layoffs. So being a good manager who does not make waves, that's also risky. I've been in rooms where companies are coming up with lists of people to lay off when they deem that that becomes necessary. And I could tell you that the easiest people for them to lay off are people that no one in the room really knows that well. These are people that perhaps did good work, but they stayed under the radar. And so people tend to feel less guilty when they're laying people off that they simply don't know that much about. So again, not doing anything could also be risky. So we want to proactively lead as a way to improve our upside in our own career development. Now, how do we find the time to lead from the middle? Because we're saddled with all of this work that we have to do day to day. Well, we have to free up time for leadership, and that means doing one thing and not another. And when you begin to delegate things that you would normally do, it can unlock the potential of your subordinates. Imagine roles and responsibilities that formerly dominated your time. They could now become opportunities for your subordinates' growth. Now, we have a very specific example. There was one director who had 6 managers reporting to him, each responsible for a distinct unit of business. What he did was he designated one manager as a coordinator for his department, freeing up himself to take on the lead in critical areas that were underserved but required leadership. So again, what he did, he had one coordinator where the other people in the department would dotted line report to him. He would consolidate the information and report to the director. Now, this is very important. When the director freed up his time, he did not go and lead in areas that he thought would be fun, that he thought would be enjoyable. He went to areas that were underserved and required leadership. So it's very important to go into those niches that you feel that no one is paying attention to, but the company would be better off if someone did. That is how you become a leader. You serve the areas that are underserved. Now, we have some more ideas on how to create more time. The first way we could create more time is to just obliterate tasks. There are some tasks that simply do not add value to the company. They are not legal requirements from regulatory agencies, but sometimes we do things because the previous person in the job did them and the one before him or her did them as well. So you want to review your tasks. Is this task creating value? One example would be reports. Reports take time to create. Reports take time to produce, disseminate, and to read. Now, if someone is not making a decision based on a report, that might be a good report simply not to create. So you can ask the question, what decision are you going to make off of this report? If not, that could be analogous to robbing shareholder value. You're spending company time on something that the company is not using for any decision whatsoever. Secondly, to create more time, we could obviate tasks if we discovered duplicate process and data redundancy. There may be 2 people doing similar work with enough overlap that you could simply consolidate and assign to one person. Thirdly, automation. We sit down with our IT department, we take a repetitive routine function, and we automate. Now we have management by exception. If you have a task where perhaps 70-80% of the people are responding the same way, well, you manage by exception and you flip it. I want you to imagine open enrollment for benefits. Well, if 80% of the people do not change their benefit plan, instead of having everyone open enroll their benefits, perhaps you have as a default only the people who are going to change their benefits get online and make the change, and everyone else simply they do not do anything, and the default would be their last selection. So this is how we manage by exception, where we take the minority action and we pay attention to that, and we simply let the majority continue to go about what their decisions were by default. Next, we have process reengineering or streamlining. This takes a little bit more time, but we're really front-loading our energy into making a process take less time afterwards. We're simply making the process more efficient. Next, we could delegate that responsibility to someone else, as our director did in our previous example, where he took one manager and made him the coordinator for the rest of the managers in the department. And then we have insourcing through distributive input. Distributive input became common with the intranet. Employee self-service systems, management self-service systems. Distributive input is when tasks that used to be done by a central person are now done by the owners of the data, with everyone doing their own work through the intranet. So that would be another way to free up time. And the final alternative, after you have already exhausted all of the others, would be to possibly outsource to a vendor if it could be done for a competitive price. Now, We need to open up ourselves to influences outside of the company. Remember, what makes executives different from non-executives is that executives take great responsibility for external relationships, listening to external signals. But most managers are actually trained to focus on internal rather than external signals. Now, most middle-level managers cannot name their 5 biggest competitors, their 5 top revenue producing products, or even ranking their products by margin or ranking their services by margins. Most middle managers could not name these items. Now, people in the sales department, yes, they knew this information cold. But if you were to go to your typical accounts payable person, perhaps, they could not name these items. Now, these are very basic fundamentals to business, but they have to deal with external signals. So part of leading by personal mandate is to start to pay attention to these personal signals, because these external signals, these are the leading indicators to what decisions the company will make internally. Now, when we say we need to listen to signals coming from the outside, we're talking customers, competitors, suppliers, or even peers across other industries. That's why informational interviews are so important, where you're just meeting with people, not because you're looking for a job, but because you're looking to exchange information that is of mutual advantage. And then finally, you need to read the trade magazines. You need to understand what's going on, not only in your department, but in your industry. So if you're working in the accounting department, yes, there are magazines about the accounting profession, but it's very important if you're in hospitality, even though you're in accounts payable perhaps, start reading the trade magazines in hospitality. Now, we said that focusing on influence is key to leading from the middle, because again, you don't have a title justifying your leadership. So we're not talking about control, we're talking about expanding your circle of influence. So you want to shift your focus by doing your job with your colleagues and not to them or for them. This is a very powerful mindset shift, because remember, people prefer to be enlisted in common causes rather than being told what they have to do. And studies have shown that employees acting on their own to achieve your goals, where they get to be creative, tends to be more effective than having them only reacting to the specificity of each direction that you give them. Now, there are several ways to accomplish this. Adopt the perspective of those you're influencing. Don't make them adopt yours. We all have a communication style, but if you are able to adapt to other people's communication styles, you are able to expand your circle of influence. Next, expose others to your information by not hoarding it. Sometimes we see people that they hoard information because they incorrectly feel that that is the key to job security. And many people hoard information. Well, don't hoard it. Share all of your information. It is a sign of confidence. And again, you're expanding your circle of influence. And very importantly, if you come up with a new idea, it is better to influence existing work processes rather than build new ones. Because when you make a current process better, instead of building an entirely new one, you have a better time to market. And remember, you don't want to create more work for your peers, because most companies want to shed processes, not build new ones. So succinctly, work to make current processes better rather than creating entirely new processes. Now again, it's about influence, not control. A very common mantra for people that know anything about couples therapy is that the therapist will say, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Well, I once told the CEO who's having a spat with his best salesperson, do you want to be right or do we want to book revenue? Right? You get where we're going. Being influential is not about proving that you're right at every turn, even if perhaps you are right. The people you have to convince are usually the same people who disagree with you the most anyway. So don't worry about having to prove yourself right all the time. because winning their support in your circle of influence is about hitting that tipping point where you've built enough critical mass where they now see things your way. It's not about the logical task of proving how you're right along every step of the way. And keep things simple. Some of us make things so complex that only experts can manage it. I'd like you to make issues so simple to describe them in such a straightforward way that any overworked manager can quickly understand. And keep a sharp focus. Never pick more than 2 important issues to work on at the same time. And think of low-hanging fruit. And do not go forward with other issues until they are accomplished, because that is how you build credibility. Now let's look at org charts. The traditional org chart represents the military chain of command. The direction of flow is downward with no links between peers across reporting lines. So I want you to consider redoing your org chart horizontally with peers as focus groups. The concerns of peers will now be viewed as feedback and not barriers to overcome. And build your organization chart beyond the firm, because this is enterprise thinking when you include your customers and suppliers on your new horizontal org chart. Because remember, org charts are very powerful symbols, and perhaps it's one of the first things people notice when going in your office. Now, when was the last time that you created innovation in your org chart? So look at this example where not only is it horizontal instead of vertically, we include our customers and suppliers. Now look at a traditional org chart, and then we could just flip it. This is another way to lead by personal mandate. Imagine people coming into your office and they see your org chart on your bulletin board, and you, the head of your department, you're not at the top, you're at the bottom, supporting all of your subordinates, and then their subordinates are on top of them. Org charts as symbols are very powerful forms of communication. So let's always remember that. And we need to work on our trusted advisor skills, because leading from the middle, people have to want to talk to you. This requires more than simply being a subject matter expertise, and it requires you being perceived as someone who can be trusted. So this means turning conversations into meaningful discussions, not monologues where you tell people what to do. Listen more than you talk, and instead of telling people what to do or what you think they should do, ask them questions to broaden their perspective, because this is how you influence. Even if you know what you think they should do, ask them questions and let them arrive at the conclusions themselves. And share with them what others have done in similar situations. This is why it's very important walking around building your social capital by finding out what other people are doing, and even having those informational interviews where you're having those peer-to-peer conversations outside of your company. Because the greater your network is, the more examples you'll have to give people you're trying to influence on what others have done in similar situations that you have spoken to. And again, this helps us become an information hub that people want to gravitate towards. Now, leading from the middle, don't wait for the perfect time. Just find a good time, because there's never a perfect time to take risks. When times are good, nobody feels the need to do things differently. And during bad times, of course, people are too busy and too scared with too many fires to put out to really be brave enough to do things differently. So there's never a perfect time. You just want to find a good time. So when could we possibly determine when a good time is? Well, don't wait for invitations, because the C-level may not know what they need outside of this subject matter expertise. So we want to target situations where the complacency of the company is challenged. This is when the company would offer less resistance to someone informally assuming a leadership role. Examples could be mergers and acquisitions, or regulatory non-compliance issues when your company is being audited, bad press, or even when a new boss has just joined the company. Right? They say life is made in the turns, not in the straightaways. So these might be good opportunities to begin practicing your leadership skills. Now, there will be a subsequent webinar, how executives at the top can foster and encourage leadership from below within their own organization. And now we're going to have a non sequitur of the day. So let's see, what could be a non sequitur? I'm thinking, all right, consider this. Human beings are works in progress that sometimes mistakenly think they're finished. So that is your non sequitur of the day. If you'd like to learn more, please join me at HR Avant-Garde. That's hravg.com. And I hope that you join me for our next webinar on December 10th. We'll be talking about the first 10 minutes of your interview. Thank you very much for joining me, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.